Okay, so basically I've been asked to talk about how adrenal insufficiency has come about with my ABPA. Short answer is, I guess I'm a victim, not a victim. I'm the result of stuff that had to happen because of COVID, shutdowns of medical systems, but we'll kind of come to that as I tell this story. So, when did I first notice the symptoms? Probably, I'll back up. I have ABPA, bronchiectasis, osteoporosis, and various other things. So, and I was diagnosed with ABPA in 2019. So I'd been on antifungals and prednisone. So, but I'd come off the prednisone and the antifungals. So in March 2022, I was finding that I had no energy, and I would sit down, and for long periods of time, I would become almost semi-comatose. I was aware that I was on the couch, but I couldn't make myself move. That I was kind of out of it and feeling nauseous. And I remember Jill on our team's group meetings talking about how she was when she came off prednisone and then was diagnosed with adrenal insufficiency, and she went into crisis. And I thought, so it occurred to me, so how was I diagnosed? It occurred to me that that might be the same thing. And my daughter, who's a palliative care physician, suggested likewise about the same time. So, okay, call my GP. And she said, don't know anything about it, but I'll find out. But it was Friday, and so it was, by the time she got back to me, yes, we need the blood test, but oops, it has to be done before 9 a.m. So it was Tuesday by the time we did a blood test, and Tuesday morning, and by 6 o'clock that night, she was on the phone to me saying, acute medical unit would like you up at the hospital right now. Your cortisol level was 28 in mmol per litre. In other words, next to nothing. So, and so further testing was done up at the hospital, and the next morning it was confirmed that yes, I did have steroid-induced adrenal insufficiency, or they said tertiary, but really they said secondary, but when you look at all the terms that comes under tertiary, but seems now that steroid-induced is a separate term altogether, and so they gave me hydrocortisone, and within 24 hours it was like, okay, I'm fine, I can walk now, which was, and I think was maybe triple dose initially, and then I had to come down to a baseline of, I think, 20 milligrams, which kind of worked. And I was also given an emergency kit, and told basically, I'm in New Zealand, and the endo nurse gave me a printout from UK, I think it was the London one, of what to do and what it was all about, and said research it on the UK support groups, that they're really good. New Zealand basically has nothing. So how this came about was that in November of 2021, I got a new respiratory doctor, who trained in the UK and was a Aspergillosis researcher. So as soon as she came on board, it was like, you can go under Christina. And basically she, which at the time there was talk about itraconazole holidays and not, and likewise I'd been off steroids, then had to go back on them. So she said, well, we kind of need to start from scratch and see if you could come off the 7.5 milligrams of prednisone that I was taking, had been taking since June of 2019. And I was back on itraconazole, having had a holiday from it, but in December of that year, it had to be stopped because of peripheral neuropathy. I tapered off the prednisone by February 2022. But in hindsight, that was probably done too quickly over the last few milligrams, and the levels were not monitored. So the adrenal insufficiency kicked in. Although I was assured by endocrinology nurse that I had done everything right. It wasn't like I'd made mistakes, it was just the way the system was. And I had been warned that if the Aspergillus ABPA flare came back, I would have to go back on prednisone, and sure enough, with no itraconazole, no prednisone, Aspergillus ABPA said party time in Alison's lungs. And because I was so new to the adrenal insufficiency and I did not recognise the importance of updosing, or the fact that I was actually rather sick at the time, I just thought, nah. And so the AI symptoms came back, and it was Easter, which was a 4 to 5 day long weekend in New Zealand. I felt like I was sinking into a crisis. Some delays in communication with my medical practitioner on the Tuesday, like I didn't do, like, oh, I'm not going to A&E. My daughter and son-in-law just left for a much needed holiday. But I mean, oh well, Tuesday everybody will be back. I'll talk to my GP. It was late afternoon before, like, they didn't call me back. I better check in. Nurse said, oh, yes, you need to talk to a doctor. The doctor I got said, oh, I need to talk to endocrinology. And next thing was a phone call back. Endo wants you to triple now, and if you don't improve, you are to go to A&E. Fortunately, that did work, and I didn't go into crisis, and I didn't have to call my daughter, who had just, as I say, gone away on holiday. So late April, I was due to see my respiratory specialist, and she confirmed, yes, ABPA flare, and yes, you have to go back on prednisone, 20 milligrams, the max that I can take, because I'd had a gastric bleed in the past from prednisone, so I was a little bit about prednisone. And the hydrocortisone was stopped while I was on that higher level. The plan was to taper after a month and see her again in 6 weeks, and a request for the biologic would then be made, as it had just been approved for funding in New Zealand, which was like up to that point it was not an option. So the problem was that the New Zealand health system was overwhelmed with post-COVID respiratory infections along with COVID, and basically the the political and financial boffins decided that the best way to manage this was to cancel all outpatient clinics. Yeah, doctors were not best pleased, as it was a false economy, that if we don't see our patients and treat them, they end up being admitted as acutes. But anyway, beside the point. And I got caught up in this. So, and it wasn't like, well, we'll close it for this long. And it was like each month, oh, your appointment's been postponed, your appointment's been postponed. And I had started the taper, but the specialist said, no, you can't taper anymore until I see you. So I was stuck on 17 milligrams of prednisone for 7 months. The main concern at that time was my ABPA, and the changes noted added to the complexity of what was working for what. I think it was at that time they also said, oh, that CT scan doesn't look good, and they started an investigation for NTM, which proved that I have got it, but it's not. It's not called, as far as I'm aware, it's probably making the bronchiectasis worse, but I can't be treated for it anyway. So how does the adrenal insufficiency affect me? I'm basically, with that length of time on the prednisone, any hope of my adrenal glands recovering was wiped out. So I'm totally dependent on managing my cortisol levels on a day-to-day, hour-by-hour level. I have multiple complex chronic health issues, most of which are the result of the damage done by the Aspergillosis or the life-saving medicines that I've had to take and I'm still on. But, we talk on our Teams group, we talk about we love them and we hate them. Prednisone has kept us alive, but it's also done a lot of damage. Its side effects are can be brutal and difficult. I haven't struggled too much with, I didn't struggle too much with the day-to-day side effects. Apart from, I did struggle hugely with the weight. Prednisone bear that said, no, you're going into hibernation, you need to eat. And I'm trying to learn to deny that bear, but it's hard. It's hard, and I went from a size 6 to a 18. Like, yeah, that was hard, but I've kind of coming to terms with that most of the time. So totally dependent. I'm now immune compromised and developing autoimmune conditions. The latest was last year. They suspected septic arthritis, and they eventually said PMR, polymyalgia rheumatica, and the only treatment for that is prednisone. So 2025 was a pretty rough year. I was in and out of hospital, and they started me on 60 milligrams of preds, and fortunately that could come down by to 40, and then 30, and then 25, and then eventually I could start the taper from 25. So it was a long year. So And I've been heavily dependent on the UK support sites, Addison's and Adrenal Insufficiency Patient Support Group, with which Prof was set up, and there's another one which I can't remember the name of, and that the information on those sites is just invaluable, and having to go through it. In New Zealand, we do not have access to adrenal endocrinologist clinic appointments in the public system, and even getting a private appointment with someone who understands adrenal insufficiency is basically was impossible when I was started to go downhill. And with the complexities, we just couldn't get any. My GP was tearing a hair out because they wouldn't. They kept denying me access. Eventually, we got a letter saying, unfortunately, we do not have capacity to see a steroid-induced adrenal insufficiency in clinic. Like, okay, so you are really on your own. But that drove me to the support groups, and I found there was a podcast from Professor Watts, and that about learning to listen to your body, and if you need to dose, you need to updose, because you sort of get this narrative of you must not take steroids, you must not, they don't understand that the steroids is a replacement, and a normal person would produce more when things, are going wrong in any way of health or stress or whatever. So, yeah, it was hard to get your head around. It's okay to updose if you need to, and it's okay if the textbook says 20 milligrams, 15 to 20 milligrams. Some people need more than that, and that's okay. And the other thing was circadian rhythm dosing that I read up about, and I thought, well, I've got nothing to lose to try and do that, because I was still not coping very well with it, and so I split my dose and have it. So, I mean, at the moment, I don't set an alarm for the early hours, but my body will tend to wake me up, and I have my meds right beside me, and I'll drink bottle of water, and I'll take them any time between 3 and 6 in the morning, so that I can actually get up and function, because I wasn't functioning until 2 hours after I'd taken my meds. So for me, circadian rhythm has been really, really important. So yeah, I follow the circadian rhythm of dosing, and that's the only thing that really works for me. It just and I have to adjust my timing. If I don't wake up until 6 or 7 to take the first dose, then all the rest of my doses have to be kind of adjusted. That's when it's very easy to forget to take a dose, because you get to, instead of 11 o'clock, you sort of get to 2 and, oh, I don't feel very good. Oh, oops, I need to. So, yeah, it's just about learning to listen. Gaining weight on the prednisone has been the biggest challenge, and and getting my head around the fact that there wasn't the support, and the GPs, if I saw a random GP, which in this day and age was, and especially over the COVID period, if you had anything that was respiratory, then you had to go through the red zone and you got whoever happened to be on. And it carried on in New Zealand for longer than I think it did in the UK. And then when we opened up our borders, respiratory, we'd had 2 years of no one really getting sick. And then it hit big time. Do I carry an emergency card? Yes. Waikato Hospital, my endo nurse is amazing. And I think she worked with the UK to get permission to copy the NHS Allison's and adrenal insufficiency patient support card, and that was customised for the Waikato region initially. I think it's now been extended to other regions around the country, and I have a copy of this card on my phone. Now, recently I sort of had to put my phone into a wallety thing, and the only thing in it is my steroid card. I carry my emergency kit pretty much everywhere, and in that kit I have copies of the sick dosing protocols signed by my nurse, my basal dose level, and what it would mean, what triple dosing will mean, what will double dosing mean, the times. Basically, she spread it out to 4: morning, mid-morning, late afternoon, evening. So, it was pretty clear. I always carry hydrocortisone. If you end up in A&E for 11 hours, then you need to be able to, take your meds. So yes, carry a card. I also have a medic alert bracelet, which one of those. Whoops, we'll find it. Just one of those bracelets. I wear a denim cuff over it because it catches on things and it annoys me. And because I live on my own, the risk of falls, family insists that I have a St. John's alarm. So I have one that works around the house, the property, and one that if I go away, it's got a microphone and everything in it. So I'm pretty well covered for emergency situations. And I think it's important because you never, a drop in your cortisol can happen quickly, and you may not, recognize it. And of course, accidents happen. You fall, you're in a motor vehicle accident or something. You need to have that emergency kit and that information available at all times. So what other tips do I have? Learn to listen to your body is the main one. You're the only one that knows what works for you. And having said that, you then have to learn to advocate for yourself and say, actually, if the nurses are saying, and timing of medication, so learning to listen to your body, and that's an ongoing process. And particularly because I've got other chronic illnesses, it's hard. It's like, is it this? Is it that? Is my kidney playing up again? but either way, you need the cortisol to deal with it. We need to keep talking to people about it. My key support comes from the NAC teams gatherings on a Thursday, and the Telegram texts, as a number of us now also have adrenal insufficiency. So it's like, oh, Alison, what do I do here? Oh, Chip, there's a couple of us particularly who will, talk back and forth because we've had it for longer, and then there are others like, oh, okay. And I know how much listening to Jill several years ago was where my information came from. And keep reading and reminding yourself about the various aspects of the condition, because it's, I don't know, I kind of think, oh yeah, I forgot about that. So and you think, oh yeah, that's important. And don't underestimate the emotional and mental aspects of dealing with all of this all the time. And that's another reason to have a good support group who understand, that lets you vent, and they don't try and fix you with useless, helpful suggestions, which come from people who don't understand chronic illness. ABPA, adrenal insufficiency, just yeah. So and the great thing about our NAC groups is that by the time we've stopped talking, Graham has usually written up a little article explaining the main things we need to know about the subject that was being discussed. So, someone was talking about sinuses, and suddenly there's, an article there, which is just so useful to have, and useful resources. I have a way of keeping track of when you took meds and how much. I'm older, and my memory is like, because so I have an app that I log it on. I have my med boxes weekly. It's all laid out and written out with okay. They're multicolored, so the bright yellow single week, that's first thing in the morning, and then there's the rest of the prednisone, rest of the hydrocortisone in a double one, with some half dose, full dose. I can tell what I've taken when, and that just helps hugely. I also keep a symptoms diary, and I try and write it down physically in the diary, and then I have a chart of sort of at the end of the day. Well, the next day I'll say, okay, I took this much, because this past year I've been on prednisone as well as hydrocortisone. It's like, okay, I took this much hydrocortisone, I took this much prednisone, I needed this much updose of the hydrocortisone because I've had shingles, I've had COVID, you name it. This year it's been one of those years, and trying to and the doc, which means it's color coded. Doctor can look at it, like, oh, okay, she can see the pattern, I can see the pattern. Yes, so, and that symptoms diary is, I also try and write, okay, how am I feeling? Why did I updose? What was I doing? I'm also trying to write down what I eat so that I monitor how much I eat. Um, and that symptoms diary, I mean, I don't do it every day. It's like, yeah, I should write that down, and then it hasn't been written down. But I write it up enough to get a general idea of, oh, okay, that's it. The patterns can be discerned of, okay, that kidney infection is coming back every whatever time or whatever. You've got it on record in your diary. When it comes to appointment, you can do a summary, flip it off to the to your doctor, and then once you have that record, helps them know where things are at before you start talking, and that just makes things easier for everybody. It feels like there's a constant need to adjust to new normals. How can I? There's a what I can do and what I can't do is changing. How I feel physically is changing, and I'm 70 in my 70s. Is this just growing old? And my GP would say, well, actually, it's not just growing old. You've got so many complex medical conditions going on. It's not just old age. There are reasons. Sometimes we can't quite figure out which or what, but that can be reassuring to know. Basically, to not dismiss things that are happening. But I guess for me, as a follower of Jesus, it's my faith and relationship with God, the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit are paramount in keeping me in the right headspace. The Word of God is essential to me to recognise that Jesus is all I need, that God is sovereign in all these things, including the difficult trials, and those we're not actually promised an easy life, but the trials are transforming me into the person that He wants to be, as in James 1 and Romans 8 and 12. When you put in multiple complex issues, it just is hard, and that's okay. But if you have to go into hospital, or see a random GP or A&E, they're good for simple, basic, this is it, focus, but seeing the whole person, very, very hard, very, very hard. And I think we need to learn to accept that that's the reality of medicine today. And so you've got to know your stuff. I read a lot of medical articles from accredited sources, not Dr. Google. And I understand that other people will not be interested in having a good understanding of the medical side of things. I've been around it for a long, long time, and as my personality, I like to understand how things work. If I understand how things work, that's fine. Doesn't matter if they work, if the outcome isn't great, just as long as I know why. That's me. Others would rather ignore it, And I can see why. ABPA at the moment is the least of my concerns. Polymyalgia, I've had to go back. I managed to get off the prednisone, and it lasted about a month. And it's like, actually, I might have to just keep taking a little bit of prednisone. So we shall see. And rheumatology said, "Oh, yes, you must go back to 2.5 for a month, and then you can maybe start trying to wean again." And it's like, okay. And I've like, oh, it's time to wean. Do I really want to wean? I can move at the moment. So, and yeah, so, and I think everyone's going to have different other issues. For me, yes, I have bronchiectasis, but it's kind of a dry bronchiectasis, so lung clearance and the MTM, non-tuberculosis mycobacterium, which they've isolated in my lungs. Yes, we should be doing lung clearance, and I've kind of joined a support group for that, but they're kind of so, you must do your lung clearance, you must, it's like, well, I'm pretty dry, and yes, I'll do it if I can get anything up, but I'm not gonna. Physio has said, look, if you're not coughing anything up, don't keep trying. You're gonna, break a rib or something. Yeah. So, and yeah, the postnasal drip thing, I kind of, I was like, and then, as I say, Graham had posted something about, the ENT side of it that was basically ignored from an ABPA perspective. And I thought, okay, yeah, I fit all those categories. Next time I'll mention it again. So I've mentioned it before, but it's like, and at my point, even if they diagnose it, there's probably nothing that they can do anyway. So, yeah, it's it becomes a catch-22 as you progress down the chronic health pathway. And I think when I was first diagnosed with ABPA, it's like, well, yes, it's non-curable, but it's manageable. But what does manageable actually entail? And I certainly didn't. But it's risk management, cost benefits versus the negatives, and I think people need to understand that too. That all the way through, it's, well, yes, that side effect is difficult, but the benefits of taking this medicine outweigh that side effect, or actually those side effects are so great for you, the benefit of taking this medicine is not worth it. And you've got to have those conversations. And yeah, so adrenal insufficiency is probably my biggest challenge. And then the other issues that come out of it or alongside it, and figuring out, okay, is it that, or is it actually you just need some more cortisol today? Yeah, that mental taxation is hard, and sometimes you just get like, oh, I'm done with doing this. I really don't care anymore. And some days it's like, yeah, I'm not writing it up. I'm not, yes, I'll take my cortisol at the times allocated and be like the little textbook robot, just to get myself through, and because it's time consuming to read all those articles, to digest what they're saying, and even to write up a report for my GP or whichever specialist I'm going to. It's time consuming, and mentally taxing. So having projects that I want to do, pacing myself physically to get so okay, you've been standing at the bench cutting stuff out, or cracking nuts or whatever. Probably you should have been squatting on the stool provided, but sometimes there isn't an option, and then it's like, okay, I've done that for an hour and a half or half an hour or whatever my capacity is on that particular task. Now you need to do something sitting down. Don't blob. Have a project that you can work on, so that you don't get to the end of the day and think, what did I do today? And so, but it is, I mean, I've never been that kind of organised, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this. That's not been my personality. One of my sons-in-law was trained as a chef. He's a businessman, but when he comes up, the family home is at the beach, and it's now the beach house. So when Brian arrives, bench is totally clear, clean up as you go, whatever you're doing, trying to work with him. You put a spoon down and you turn around to pick it up and it's gone, which is great. But it's like, okay, Brian's got a point here, and so I'm learning to put away as I go more than I ever used to. But it's all part of, for me, the learning process of how can I manage with limited energy and limited physical capacity. I have a tiny garden, but even I can only I try and tell myself only half an hour. It's usually an hour, maybe stretched to an hour and a half. At that point, I have to stop. Whereas I would do a whole lot more than that in the past. You've got more resources and more projects in your mind than you're ever going to have time to do. So which ones need to go? Yeah, but focusing on doing that has just been tremendously helpful to when I have a camper van, I haven't been able to go out camp, because something keeps happening, or I just am not safe enough to be able to lift whatever I need to lift, or there's a medical appointment here, and there's so I've focused more on my craft, and doing what I can, and trying to, and I've got some young mums from church who are, can we come and hang out with you and work on unfinished projects? And sure, great. So yeah, we have a UFO or PDF PhD night, project's half done. And the other little thing that I do is I print off information leaflets, or I have especially for the ABPA, because nobody knows what ABPA is, let alone anything about it. So I need to get more printed, but every medical appointment I go to, I try and have some pamphlets, those little leaflets, especially the ones off the Aspergillosis Trust site that Jill put together. They're colourful, but they're in paper. It's something in their hand. Has the websites on. I write the NAC website on, and since I started that, NAC has put more on their website that is useful. So I need to say, okay, which ones am I going to get printed off this time? It amazes me that particularly in the hospital, that maybe it is, oh yes, we need that in the office, and it slowly building up information is important, and I think probably also important to do the same for adrenal insufficiency. I haven't kind of got to that point yet, but it needs to be not a whole lot of paper, but it needs to be something that you can hand to people, and random people you're talking to, particularly the asthmatics, not controlled, ABP, never heard of it. They've got something that they can look up, something that they can give their doctors to say, is it possible that this could be happening? And I think the same is probably going to be true for the adrenal insufficiency, because it's not well recognised, and if they've been on preds, it's happening, and basically the medical world don't know what to do with it. They have the textbook, this is what you have to do, and if that's all you're allowed to take, and you need to take it at this time, learning to, well, actually, for me, this is going to work. And then having the fortitude to argue with them. And a GP had said, you need to have an endo, and I said, oh, how I wish. And said, well, how about going up to Auckland, which is schlepping, 2 hours up north, and the systems at Auckland don't talk to Waikato, and at the moment I don't have the energy. And then I remembered that sometime previously I'd written out a full medical history. I was on my phone. I don't have to redo that. It's already in my computer. All I need to do, and I've also written about how I was stuck on the prednisone, and that's basically killed my adrenal glands. So I just had to do a covering letter, sent it off, and she phoned me back and said, yeah, well, I could see you, but it won't be until April. And this was just before Christmas. New Zealand shuts down over Christmas, New Year. It's summer. I'm not going to see anybody before April if I can find someone in Auckland. And besides which, I'm too complex to not be all under the same jurisdiction. So I said, oh, okay, April's fine. Well, I got an appointment, I think the 4th of April, which, nothing opens up until at least February. So that wasn't too bad. And she initially sort of said, well, let's see if we can, wean you off and kickstart the adrenal glands. And I was like, yeah, I wish you luck on that. And then I think she must have reread the history and came back through my nurse that, yeah, we're not going to try and withdraw the hydrocortisone. So that was a relief, because the thought in her letter, there was the problem, or what she'd said is, the problem is that your other conditions may sabotage the process, and we'll have to keep going back to starting it from stage one again, and it will be brutal to come off it. But that little phrase of could sabotage, I thought, well, that's the understatement of the year. And once she kind of reconsidered, said, no, we're not going to try and take you off and restart, which was a relief. And then when I ended up in hospital beginning of last year, there was nights of, and I was blown away, because basically she'd called in the nurse and said, okay, you can monitor, and if need be, you can talk to me about any needs that I had if it was too complicated for Tanya. And when I was in hospital, they obviously, because of preds and hydrocortisone and me saying, don't you dare, her and her team showed up to see me one day. It was like, oh, okay. So, and yesterday I got the first ever, we've got a endocrinology clinic telephone consult appointment. Like, okay. And I thought, oh yeah, it's probably about 6 months since she saw me in hospital. So yes, I'm in the system, but for many in New Zealand, that is not the case. So being persistent had paid off, but it's a hard, yeah. It's just a constant.